Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome on into the Rooted podcast, brought to you by our awesome sponsors over at Green Bros, home of the world's premier leading harvest solutions for cannabis equipment. You need something in your harvest, Green Bros has you covered. Hit them up, greenbros.com. Tim Strommel coming to you from our Rooted Production Studios out here in beautiful yet freezing cold and snowy Denver, Colorado. Thanks for tuning in, being on iTunes, SoundCloud, or the host website, stayrooted.com. We certainly appreciate having you with us on this journey. Quick reminder to leave us a quick review on whatever platform you're listening on or watching on, because we release all these podcasts on our YouTube page as well with full video. Leave us a review on any of those platforms so we can continue to grow the show. Also, be sure to check out Rooted TV on Cannabis Club TV or High Times TV. Okay, there we go. Out of the gate, some intros there. I teased some big-time upcoming podcast guests on the last show, and if you've tuned in to just find out who they are, I can tell you that we have two guests we're releasing on this show. One of them being, okay, here we go, the infamous Tommy Chong will be flying out to LA this weekend, in fact, to interview Tommy, meaning by the time you hear the show, we'll already have it in the can, and it'll be on its way to your listening ears or your viewing eyes, because we're shooting video with Tommy as well that we will air inside of a Rooted TV episode. So super excited about that. Okay, the second huge celebrity we're going to be interviewing while we're out in LA will be announced near the end of the show, so stay tuned for that. A little bit of a teaser down the line. Speaking of Cannabis Club TV, I mentioned just a second ago, and Tommy Chong, who I mentioned just a second ago, we've got CCTV founder and CEO Danny Keith on the show this afternoon. Danny and Tommy have known each other for a long time, and Tommy got involved pretty much at the ground floor with Danny and CCTV. So we'll talk about that relationship, how it came about, and what it's doing for the platform, as well as some amazing new announcements from Danny and the CCTV team. I threw in an extra C. Lastly, we'll talk banned commercials at the Super Bowl, opposing political stances on cannabis, and so much more. We're going to get set to welcome in Danny in just a second. Before we do, just let you know this podcast brought to you by our awesome buddies over at Green Bros, home of the world's premier dry harvesting solutions. From small-scale cultivations all the way up to commercial grows, Green Bros dry trimmers, trichome extractors, destemmers, sorters, precision batchers, the box, rosin presses. All these machines want to save you time, money, and labor. Check them out, greenbros.com, or call 844-DRY-TRIM to schedule a free demo in your area today. That's 844-DRY-TRIM. You can also check out Green Bros at the NECAN convention in Boston, March 22nd to 24th, Lift in Toronto, June 6th to 9th, NCIA San Jose, July 22nd to 24th, and of course, annually at the MJ BizCon in Vegas out in December. So make plans if you're going to be in the area at any of those. Okay, without long last, without any further ado, let's go ahead and welcome in our good buddy, Danny Keith. Danny, we had you on podcast episode 54, so if people want to jump back, learn more about you as an entrepreneur, get more information on your background and what CCTV is all about, they can certainly go and do that. But can you give us the soundbite version of what CCTV is for those who haven't heard of it yet?
Absolutely. Hey, thanks for having me. And by the way, I don't know what you did, but it's colder here than it is in Colorado today.
I don't know about that, man. We're in the teens, and the low tomorrow is 3. So that's not. Yeah. If I could fit the degrees on a number on one hand, I'm not happy about it.
Well, so Cannabis Club TV is essentially a cannabis television network that we broadcast into dispensaries. We broke another record this month. We did 2.8 million videos, over 40,000 hours of content. Essentially, it's cannabis tilted television for the cannabis consumer. And what we do is help to educate and build brands. We get the opportunity to help these brands tell their stories at the dispensary level, which is a very unique spot.
And I mentioned it out of the gate. You've known Tommy Chong for a long time. He's been involved with CCTV. How do you become friends with an industry legend like Tommy?
It's totally by accident. In my previous life, I owned a surf shop. His son, Paris, happens to surf as well. So we formed a relationship at a pretty early age and just kept surfing together. And then when he did the bong business, I was helping him. And Paris, right prior to Tommy doing a 9-month federal stint for us shipping a bong out to Pennsylvania. And then we've just stayed really good friends over the years. And when I had my entourage moment in March of 2016 and decided to, launch Cannabis Club TV, Tommy was the first person I leaned into, and he's been an amazing influencer and friend and just support factor.
Now, you mentioned the 9-month stint he had to do for basically being involved in a business that sold glass pipes, bongs, obviously, that they're referred to. When that's something, by the way, we're going to ask him about this weekend. But when you're around and you're working and around Paris, his son, and this goes down and they get raided and he gets arrested and sent to jail, what's your reaction like in all of that?
Sure. I mean, I'm not going to use the words I used when I found out because they're not. But look, it really set. Everybody kind of settled down for a number of years. I mean, I remember, everybody stopped smoking weed. Everybody got away from the industry, and everybody tried to go on the straight and narrow. I think Paris ended up going to school at UCLA to become an attorney. Tommy toned down his rhetoric. Obviously, the upside though, Tommy always makes things. He always turns poop into flowers, if you will. During his 9-month stint, he happened to bunk up with Jordan Belfort from Wolf of Wall Street. Ended up helping him get his movie made and book written. And Tommy had made a friend out of somebody who in most people your bunkmate is not usually your friend. So once again, Tommy came out smelling like roses, and now he's got not that he needed any street cred, but he definitely has the cred he needs in order to be one of the main influencers in this space. I mean, I would say there's probably only one other person that I would acknowledge that rivals Tommy in the space, and that's Jack Herrera. And so and Tommy has a lot of respect for him as well. So I just think it's a blessing for us to be able to work with Tommy and to be able to, continue telling his story and his message and, really his cancer scare, my wife's brain tumor, and my dad eventually dying of opiates is what led me to the cannabis space. And so I'm grateful that I've known Tommy as long as I have and that he's lent his support to us.
Talk about that and the support that he's given you. How does that support factor into what CCTV is doing?
So there's not always, it's funny because Tommy's, Cheech and Chong, if you will, is always a bipartisan issue, right? Some people are really into the Chong thing. Some people are like, they want to get away from the campy stoner. And so, with Tommy, what we've really done is try to moderate between his campy stonerisms. And, he's a really smart guy, man. And he's a real big advocate for the plant and not just in the methodology about smoking weed every day. The funny thing about Tommy, and you can ask him this, he's a one-hitter quitter. He's not a guy that sits there and chiefs on a joint for, 4 hours. He always used to tell Paris and I, man, you guys are just wasting. After the first hit, you're stoned. You don't need to smoke anymore. So Tommy makes one-hitters and it's just funny. You think people want to smoke a joint with them all the time. He takes one hit and he's like, I'm done. And people just kind of trip out. They're like, well, you're the godfather of ganja, and you're not chiefing. But that's just how he rolls, and he's always used the plant to help medicate. And he loves CBDs. He loves tinctures. He loves all kinds of things. So he's a full plant guy, and he's a great advocate for the space.
It's funny that you mentioned that, Danny, because I'm going to write that down and I'm going to ask him about that and his tolerance and stuff like that. Because I'm a one-hitter guy too.
Tolerance, dude. Don't get me wrong. The guy could. I mean, it's like one hit after one hit after one hit after one hit. But he's not. He'll do a hit and he'll walk around and he'll do another. He kind of just spaces it out, and he's just not a. He's not one of those guys. We have to always watch him. We don't let him get too high when we do our events, because then just like anybody else, you get couch locked.
Yeah, you veg out. Now we're going to be obviously interviewing him this next weekend. You had a big part in setting that up with us, so on the show, just thank you for that. But what's the one question that you maybe have always wanted to ask Tommy, or what one question could you give me that you think he'd give a great answer to?
I just want you to tell him it wasn't my fault that he went to prison.
Was that ever part of the conversation?
He always blames, Paris and I when we're hanging out. He's like, "Hey, thanks for that federal stint. That was awesome." And it's like, look, we didn't know, man. We didn't know that this is before the know your customer laws were in place, and we shipped a pipe, man. You know what I mean? And a piece of glass is what got him put in jail. I mean, it was him, Jerome Baker. It was called Operation Pipe Dream. So a number of people went down for that, and it was just a way to more fear tactics by our government, right? It was a way to try to scare people. And now it's funny, a lot of those people are now sitting on boards of large, cannabis companies and, trying to take advantage of the space. So it's just interesting. I'm sure Tommy has some great insight on, the people that he saw on the other side of the law that are now on our side too,
Danny, let's get to more about CCTV in just a minute. Obviously, the Super Bowl just took place over these last couple of weekends, and I thought the commercials were just as boring as the game myself. I mean, no one's really taking chances. No one wants to polarize audiences. But I want to ask your thoughts on the commercial that CBS didn't want to air. Now, they didn't ban it, but they didn't want to air the commercial that became a big controversy. What was your thought on that issue?
Well, Acreage probably got the best form of viral media that they could ever want. If you're a marketing person, you almost want CBS to refuse your ad because, like, for example, we picked it up on our network and ran it for free, and we're still running it. It's a big reason why we're in the space. Again, John Boehner sits on Acreage's board. Kind of an interesting space to have a guy who was, more or less against the cannabis movement now is a big proponent of it. I think there's enough fear in the space still where, when you have real assets that the government can go after, you're going to be afraid of extending yourself. However, it's funny, right? CBS also owns a pleasure amount of billboards throughout the state of California and other states. They have no problem running those cannabis ads on those billboards. So I just think we're still in a space, Tim, where people don't have a full comprehension of what we're all about. And it's unfortunate that CBS chose not to air that commercial, but at the same time, it kind of plays into the hands of the cannabis space. So Acreage got a lot of burn off that. I mean, everybody was talking about it. And so you can't lose with that situation. It was a heavy commercial. It's one of the main reasons why I am willing to be out of the cannabis closet with my status is because I believe in the medicinal side of it. And I've seen it help such a plethora of people that it's really that's what Cannabis Club TV is all about, is to tell stories like that.
And I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, we actually covered and talked about it on our latest Rooted TV episode that'll hit soon. But they saved $5.2 million. I mean, that's the average cost of a 30-second Super Bowl ad, and I believe that commercial was a minute. So maybe it would have even been more than that. And they got all the views they wanted, and they got more publicity than they would have, in my opinion, if the ad would have ran. It would have been, oh, cool, check that ad out, and then everyone would have moved on. But now they get weeks and weeks of coverage. Danny, if we could, let's stick to current events. This one's a little bit more maybe something you might not have heard of. I'm hoping to kind of stump you, but for a second, we'll talk about the South Carolina Attorney General. He just called cannabis the most dangerous drug in America at a recent press conference. The press conference consisted of the South Carolina Attorney General and some South Carolina Medical Association members who are all going to oppose a proposed medical cannabis bill, calling it the most dangerous drug in America out in South Carolina. What do you hear when you think of that?
Well, I did see that come across my radar. First and foremost, I think you have to look at who's financially backing those people. Usually big pharma's got a hand in it. And that's, why they're staying loyal to their, we have a real big problem with politicians right now. They're not beholden to the will of the people or to make our society better. I get asked all the time, is cannabis a gateway drug? Is cannabis a dangerous drug? I think certain people probably shouldn't smoke weed. It's not for everyone. And can it be a gateway? Sure. Alcohol is a gateway. If someone's got a problem with their mental health or they have a problem with their psychology of their being, cannabis can invoke other transactions. I'm going to tell you right now, there's not been one documented case of anybody overdosing on cannabis, driving past the speed limit on cannabis. I mean, there's been so many tests that have come out that say, cannabis is one of the safest intoxicants we've seen, in our lifetime. So it doesn't surprise me. And in a way, I kind of enjoy it when people come and take that presence because, look, without conflict, you don't have resolution. And so if somebody's not asking the question of, is it the most dangerous drug in the world, you can't have an answer for that. And I think if you look globally at what's taking place, Tim, and I'm sure you'll nod your head in agreement, like this cannabis and the hemp movement, the entire plant movement is probably the biggest thing since man discovered fire. We're really on something where not only medicinally does it help, I would rather see people smoke cannabis than drink, And so if you want to talk about a dangerous drug, alcohol has caused more deaths, more destruction, more pain than cannabis ever has. I mean, the biggest thing you have to worry about with someone that's smoking too much weed is you got to guard your kitchen because they're going to come and eat all your food.
Yeah, and to follow up, I forgot to mention, but the South Carolina Medical Association members that were there went up and actually opposed the viewpoint that the Attorney General had said. They were like, we don't agree. It's not the most dangerous drug in America, which I thought was nuts for them to come up and say. But yeah, there's just continued rhetoric. And I don't think enough people are pointing out the fact that the federal government has as many studies to fall back on as we do. All the studies that exist,
patents.
Yeah,
they have the patents on stuff. I mean, so it's really the reason why Cannabis Club TV exists is to right those wrongs, right? To get people to understand and to be educated and to look. You should ask questions. You should ask questions about the pills your doctor's prescribing you. If it's telling you that you're going to bleed out of your ass and you're going to like have a swollen throat and you could possibly die, but you still take that, but you look at cannabis as a dangerous drug, then you're a little bit misaligned.
And to follow up on that, it was just nuts that he would go on in his speech. I just read a little bit about it, but he mentioned things like you're impaired and other side effects of cannabis that could easily have described alcohol or opiates, like you mentioned. So it was just funny that he was sitting there and blatantly saying stuff like that. Now, at the same time, roughly around the same time, Baltimore City State's Attorney Marilyn Mosby, she went the opposite way. She announced that Baltimore City would no longer prosecute cannabis possession crimes, and they would vacate as many as 5,000 old cannabis convictions. Now, Baltimore, made famous from The Wire, has a notorious drug system in their city and a drug problem, and they're one of the more diverse populations. And you know, she said something like 90% over the last 3 years of citations for cannabis were given to the African American community as opposed to any other demographic. So it's just so nuts that you have one side that's sitting here in Baltimore saying, okay, we're going to move on, get with the times, and the other side, South Carolina, maybe within a week of each other, going two opposite ways.
Well, Tim, you know, the war on drugs has long since failed. It's obviously been a racist and a classist war. If you're a white male, which we have that, connotation, which isn't always a blessing, we don't get as prosecuted as much as someone of color or someone in a poor situation. I think we have to realize, and you kind of touched on something. I think that in 2019 for Cannabis Club TV, what we're really looking to do is help vacate those crimes, help tell the story, help move the legal presence in these states to let these non-violent offenders out, and to really look at what we've done and how we've segregated a group of people. I see all the time, it's like we persecuted racially, but now all of a sudden John Boehner can sit on a board and he's making millions of dollars and nobody's, confronting him on that or putting him in shackles. So we really, as a country and as a globe, we've really got to look at, cannabis was demonized because of racial implications and an economic driver. Marijuana, which is a word I really try to avoid using, is a racist term that was developed to basically keep Mexican immigrants out of the country. So it's, we've got to look through this, man, and we've got to look at the stories and we've got to understand why people are doing stuff. Look, there's people that are slinging weed and crack and heroin. Those people, they need to be taken care of and locked up. But for people that are growing plants, I just saw a guy in Iowa that got busted for like 25 plants in his backyard. It's just like, man, it's a plant. It's not something that we're manufacturing. It's never killed anybody, and yet because the powers that be don't know how to monetize or how to get their hands in it, they just don't want to have anything to do with it. Or there's just a lack of education around it, just straight ignorance.
Danny, we last talked about a year ago on the platform, and since then, obviously, this industry grows at an exponentially quick rate. I'm pretty sure I asked you how you deal with the stigma and people talking about or reacting to the fact that you're in the cannabis space. How have you seen that change over the last year, maybe, in terms of, your company's grown, it's gotten bigger, you're a big name in entertainment in the space. How have you dealt now when you come across cannabis stigma?
Well, it's kind of like, in any other business, you get people that are throwing shade and telling you that, what you're doing is not the right thing, or how could you, I just dealt with it the other day. We have an amazing, in Santa Cruz where I live, we have an amazing homeless addiction issue. And I'm fairly involved in local politics, and I'm trying to work on finding a solution, right? Looking outside of our community and seeing where other communities have worked on these things. And immediately I got hammered by this guy saying, how can somebody who has a company that promotes the use of pot or cannabis be an advocate for addiction? And I immediately fired back, and I was like, dude, first of all, they've shown that people using cannabis can start to get off of opiates. They've shown that cannabis actually helps some mental issues that people have when they're self-medicating to create those mental issues. And, look, I'm trying to tell stories. I'm looking at it from, everybody wants to look at it from the intoxication standpoint, but you cannot deny the truth when it's helped people with epilepsy, Parkinson's, Crohn's, nausea, eating disorders, cancer treatment. I mean, it's just that the solutions far outweigh the problems when it comes to cannabis. So I just, when I had people that were naysaying me when I first came out, now they're patting me on the back. It's just like, you kind of you don't want to be, I don't know what the word I'm looking for is. You don't want to be discerning to those people and kind of write them off. You want to embrace them and bring them in. It's just fear, man. I mean, stigma is really born out of fear. And when you can get people to jump that shark and come over and understand and destigmatize, you don't want to chastise them. You want to encourage them, and you want to say, thanks, I'm glad you finally see the light. So it's a real struggle to not be bitter when people that were hating on you are now trying to, figure out how to get in the space. I think that my most favorite question is, I want to get into cannabis. What can I do? And I'm like, I don't know. What do you do right now? Like, can you use your skill set in cannabis? And if so, figure it out,
Yeah, and talking about the stigma, one of the things that's interesting that I think the Rooted platform is doing that identifies well with what you're doing at CCTV isn't necessarily trying to counter every narrative and every stigma that's out there. It's taking the approach of creating your own narrative. On Rooted TV in this podcast, we do things how we want. We don't talk about, what's your stigma, or this guy's saying this, so we have to address it. And same thing kind of with CCTV, where you're not out here trying to disprove everything. You're out here trying to create a new reality or a new narrative, I guess, of what cannabis can be. And by creating a narrative rather than just always reacting to what other people are saying, you start to control the story in a way, don't you?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think, when we talked a year ago, Tim, you were one of the first shows that we brought on. I had this vision. A lot of our competition are signage companies. They're pumping ads. They're pumping small amounts of content. And I had this vision that people want to consume content that is cannabis tilted, but that's not like always punching you in the face with cannabis, but it's educational, and it's a place where they can begin to learn, right? We're a very visual society now with video. So last year when we spoke, I think we were in 6 states, maybe, or 40 or 50 locations. Now we're in 11 states in cannabis, 14 states if you count hydro, and we're broadcasting into almost 200 locations. Now we have close to 50 channels. We just signed a deal with Civilized last week to help, which Derek is really on the. I was just with him yesterday. We're on the same page when it comes to the narrative of cannabis. And so when you get guys like myself and Derek and yourself and Civilized and the guys at Green Bros, who are all very smart people, very astute business people, and we can bring this to them, we can bring this message out. I think, just to your point, you don't stop to deal with every single cherry picking guy along the way or girl along the way that's hating on you. You just kind of keep rolling the message out, and you keep telling the story, and you keep hearing back from people, from the dispensaries or the consumers or the content providers, that, hey, man, this is really working, and we really appreciate what you set up.
Real quick, again, I want to let you all know this podcast brought to you by our awesome partners over at Green Bros, home of the world's premier dry harvesting solutions. And if you haven't heard, Green Bros just announced a partnership with Purigen to bring you the box. If you haven't seen this thing, it's absolutely amazing. It was originally developed for tissue sterilization for surgical implications. For instance, if you needed a new ACL, they'd get the cadaver ACL, they'd sterilize it with this technology. It would go inside of you. That's absolutely nuts. The box's remediation technology can eliminate eliminate mold or other microbial organisms in your harvest. It can also rehydrate your flower if it's become too dry, or even infuse terpenes into your flower, allowing you to create a one-of-a-kind flavor profile that is truly unique to your company, all using reactive oxygen technology, meaning no harmful microwaves or radiation that can drastically harm your flower or your flower's DNA. They really figured it out over there at Purigen. You got to see this thing to believe it. Hit them up, 844-379-8746 or info@greenbros.com for more information. We're talking with Danny Keith, the founder and CEO of Cannabis Club TV. We'll link the website in the description of the podcast below so you can have no trouble going and finding their platform. If you have a dispensary, a hydro store, maybe even a head shop, hit them up and they can get high-level entertainment into your venue at basically almost no cost. We'll talk to Danny about that in just a minute. So Danny, back to CCTV. Now that's a platform aimed at dispensaries, but as I mentioned a moment ago, you've launched into hydro stores. Tell me about that project and how that came about.
Well, so we, Green Bros came on as an advertiser for Cannabis Club TV. And the one thing I like about this space is that I feel like good people are attracted to one another. At least that's kind of our model. I was just having a talk with Dana, our chief development officer, yesterday, and it's like, you have to leave yourself open in this space. You have to be willing to be burned, right? If you don't put yourself out there and engage in relationships, you're not going to grow. So we happened to run across Marco and Colin at Green Bros, and I happened to be in San Diego doing some installs. We called them up. We said, hey, let's go have some drinks. Let's go have dinner. Let's get to know each other a little bit better. The outcome of that was a very sizable dinner. And I'll let Colin and Marco tell you about that. We ordered meat by the ounce. And it resulted in us having an MJ Biz presence with them and actually elevating from just a cannabis-based dispensary platform to a hydro store platform. And we just launched into the first 10 stores with GrowGen. It's under Harvest TV, HRBST.tv. And really what that is doing is it's going to play similar content, not necessarily always cannabis tilted content, but growing style content that we then put into hydro stores and help elevate the education there. Hydro stores are another place where there's really nobody that's in existence in that space for us. And by working with people like yourself and Green Bros and a couple other people, we're able to deliver more growth-centric content than just cannabis tilted content. So yes, we are looking to build the alternative television network in cannabis, hydro, and head shops. And right now we have 12 hydro stores. We're about to add another 10. We're looking to probably be in the couple hundred by the middle of the year in hydro. Cannabis will be upwards around 500 by the middle of the year, and head shops are right behind that. So it just really helps kind of book in the industry from growing it to smoking it to what you need to smoke it in between. And some of those are all the same customer.
And Danny, you just alluded to the civilized relationship, and I mentioned Harvest TV. Those are just a couple of new developments. What else do you have going on? Tell us more about Civilized and what else you have going on.
So Civilized, they're a big content play in the space, and they've really focused, over the time as we've looked at different big content partners, so people that are able to provide you evergreen. You're one of the most prolific producers of content in our network right now. You keep your evergreen content right around 50 to 60%, which is really high. And so other people don't produce content at that clip. Civilized is another one that's like, we're launching their show Ask a Bud Tender and First High. And, those are two shows that they've already gotten a really great response out of on YouTube and other platforms, but not everybody can live on YouTube because, and like for Civilized, for example, they don't necessarily monetize very well on YouTube. They can do some inline programming. By partnering with us, we can actually get their content in front of eyeballs, guaranteed, uptick their customer acquisition, and really help their brands that they're working with and their content that they're trying to produce to help reduce stigma, change the narrative, and really we just got to educate people, Tim, and they're a great partner. I go at business. I want to work with certain people, and I'll wait to work with certain people. And the deal with Civilized took probably 4 to 6 months to just really work through and understand all the intricacies. Now we spend 1 day a week in the Civilized offices in Venice, just looking to propound everything that we're working on and really kind of align our efforts in helping the brands. I mean, at the end of the day, your content, all this other content is really built to help brands become established.
Go check out episode 54 of the Rooted podcast if you want to know more specifically about Danny, CCTV, and how this project all got started. Danny, this is obviously a podcast that got founded on a love of talking about cannabis and entrepreneurship and how those two lines intersect. We talk about bottlenecks, overcoming hurdles, all kinds of stuff like that. So going back to our episode in 2018, early 2018, almost a year ago, let's kind of update people as to what has been the toughest part in terms of growing pains over the last year, now that you've had that year, and how have you navigated them?
Well, in business, Tim, you want to project and you want to have pro formas and you want to try to trend so that you can make bets, you can hedge on things. I think in cannabis, I just was on another podcast and they asked me a similar question and I couldn't have answered that a year ago. Now that answer is, if you look at our sales trends, you can see where market pressures impact them, whether it's testing, whether it's shortage of product, whether it's, Michigan, for example, was on fire and then it got closed down and now it's back. So you have some unusual market pressures in the space that are really hard to trend. Everybody wants that hockey stick growth straight up to the left or to the right, if you will, depending on how you're looking at it. And the problem is that you've got to kind of navigate those pitfalls and you got to be aware of the space. Typically in advertising, which is what we do, you're just grinding on getting customers. So you don't pay attention. Like if you're selling television advertising, you're not looking at the market impacts of automobile production, right? So you're just selling ads. In cannabis, you got to be willing to throttle back and throttle forward based on what the market can handle. And so what we've really tried to do is when brands got nailed and they had packaging issues or they had production issues or testing issues, rather than dropping them like a hot rock, we worked through it with them and we tried to help them while they were on their knees, if you will. And then when they got back up on their feet, they were really appreciative. So it's really about, if you're really truly invested in this space, yes, you're going to make money, right? That's the first thing that everybody's concerned about, is that they're going to make money. But moreover, are you building a foundation? And what we've really worked on doing is we've worked on being consistent and we worked on being stable and we worked on being good partners. And we want to make the long-term investment into people, not the short-term investment. So again, when brands were having trouble or they got back on their feet, we gave them extra social mentions. We gave them extra spins on the TVs. And we really we introduced them to dispensary owners. We really try to be that full-service partner for our brands. And ultimately, the dispensaries are appreciative of us, the customers are appreciative of us, and the content providers are. But the key hinge pin is those brands. If we don't have those brands, we don't really have a network, because that's how we finance. So we just pay close attention to our partners and make sure that they're happy and they're feeling like it's a healthy relationship.
Something I really want to get your take on is lately I've been seeing streaming services like Netflix, Hulu, all beginning to air some cannabis content. Like there's a cannabis cooking show. I think that's on Hulu. There might have been one I saw on Netflix. But what do you think when you turn on those streaming platforms? Because I'm assuming you, just like anyone else, uses those. When you see a cannabis show finally on there, what do you think?
Well, Tim, I can't deny the fact that I hearken back to the days in the surf industry, right? They always sometimes bastardize the situation. So, we would see a surf commercial and the board's on the top of the car the wrong way. They never really talked to somebody that was in the surf industry. So same thing with cannabis. Everybody's going to try to figure out how to get a piece of it. The real difference between us and those services is that we're a geo-targeted hardware device that we can control our broadcast unit by unit. And that the home's the same way. When I look at what Hulu's done or what Netflix has done, they're a little off mark sometimes because they aren't really, they've got someone that's willing to get on camera. They got someone that's willing to get out there and do it. But at the end of the day, is it reaching the customer that they want it to reach? I still think we have a fair amount of undereducated people, and they almost look at consuming cannabis content like consuming adult content, right? So they feel a little bit like mischievous, or they don't want anybody to catch them watching it. So I think you have to have here's the deal. If you're a cannabis consumer and you also drink alcohol, do you have a beer with your family, and do you at the same time consume cannabis with your family? I think we got to get to the point where the stigma around, oh my gosh, it's cannabis content on Netflix. It's just content. And we got to remove that whole, boo, it's just go watch the content. And if you enjoy it, it'll stick around, because that's how it works. If you don't enjoy it, you don't watch it, it's going to go away. Just like that one show that had, I can't remember the name of it offhand, but Netflix ran Disjointed.
Kathy Bates.
Yeah, that was terrible. That was a poor reflection of the cannabis space, and it was a campy version. I just don't think we're ready for that yet. Cooking shows are amazing. We have cooking category on our network as well. It's a really, we work with Magical Butter on that. Those, people want, that's the kind of information people want. I'm not certain we're ready for a cannabis show just all around. Like, why can't we just infuse cannabis into like a normal show? Like, why does it have to be like this special show off to the side? So, look, our bigger plans are to go from the couch to the pocket, right? And we want to be the space where people come to find cannabis tilted content that doesn't necessarily always have to be hyper infused. I mean, you're dealing with issues that are in and around cannabis, but they're not like, you're not banging people on the head with it. So I think we're still in a real early space for that. And it's always helpful when bigger people, push out stuff that, gets the general population thinking.
And you hit on something that hits home with me and Rooted, because when I was growing up, I remember instances when I would walk into a room, my dad was watching some sort of cannabis cooking show or something. And this was back in like the 90s when it was like on public broadcasting.
Sure.
But he'd change the channel because, like you said, he didn't want to see people seeing him watch that content. So with Rooted TV, that's really part of the approach that we've taken, is that we want it to be a show that you leave on when someone comes in the room, because it doesn't have that, hey, there's just some guy sitting on a couch smoking and getting stoned. Now there is a place for that content, and that content does very well in this industry, but there's also that reach over line where you can hit, your normal cannabis content people and those that are kind of trying to dip their toe in the water, right?
Well, I think we have an abstinence issue in this country, specifically around substances, sex. I mean, we're just really big on don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. And anytime you tell anybody don't do something, that's going to make them more intrigued. I think you just have to look, there's always age appropriate stuff when it comes to content, right? But if someone's infusing, like we have Jeff the 420 chef on our show, and he's just infusing clean cannabis into a cooking situation, you don't have to point that out to your kid. You don't have to point that out to your mother-in-law that you're watching a cannabis. Like, let them figure it out on their own. But we got to have that discussion around teaching kids about moderation. And if we really are concerned about the younger generation abusing something, then educate them around it. Don't tell them not to do it. Explain it to them. There's generations that'll avoid alcohol, or, this next generation that's coming up, they're against the whole opiate thing, so the yin and yang of life always has a way of working itself out. And another year we'll sit here and talk again, and things will be dynamically different. I mean, things have changed so much since the last time we spoke, but I think hopefully we start to see more of this embrace content delivery, and people are curious, even if they don't want to use cannabis, that they at least understand and don't spread mistruths.
Danny, I promise we won't wait another year to get you on the show. Tell me, what does the rest of 20... What?
In MJ Biz. We did our podcast in MJ Biz, so
that's true.
In between,
What does the rest of 2019... You've alluded to it a little bit, but what does the rest of 2019 look like for CCTV? And then give me, your long-term vision, because you mentioned projecting out.
Absolutely. So the way I operate as a business guy, Tim, is I look for issues within the space. Then I try to look at, is there a monetizable solution? And then how much of the market can I own is really where we go. So most recently, in addition to spreading out to Harvest TV and Headshot TV, we also embarked on an API-driven menu board that also incorporates our video player. So, yesterday I was just in Long Beach at LB Collective. I installed eight TVs in that location. What that does is most of these dispensaries spend hours and hours and hours entering in their menus onto their board. We've found a way by partnering with Headset to bring in dozens of different point of sales and be able to put that menu board up on the wall for these dispensaries. So that's like our big expansion plan right now. Is we don't care if it's a Cannabis Club TV or a menu board, because they both have the television on it. And we're looking to provide solutions and help the dispensaries. There's still a lot of confusion within the dispensaries. There's point of sales, there's customer retention tools, there's online ordering, there's delivery. and there's fractured involvement all the way around. And so we're going to steady plow on providing a solution for people, first and foremost. Second, we're looking at expanding into new emerging states without the expectation of there being a market. We want to be in those states before there's a market. So when the market develops, we're there to help. So we're investing into territories that are brand new, Pennsylvania, Maryland, Massachusetts. In fact, I'm going to Boston next week to go to NCIA to talk to these dispensaries out there. So, the combination of Cannabis Club TV as a vehicle, the menu boards that Cannabis Club TV has, Harvest TV and Head Shop TV, we're going to be steady moving ahead on education, building brands, customer connections, and delivering great content. That's really our focus this year.
His name is Danny Keith. He's the founder and CEO of Cannabis Club TV. Go ahead, scroll down wherever you're listening to this. Hit the link. Go check out the site and what they're doing. Danny, before we get out of here, I mentioned I have to get the second name out that we're going to be interviewing this following weekend out in L.A., and we're actually going to get to visit Jim Belushi at his house. Now, he has a cannabis farm up in Oregon. He's talked about opiate addiction and how that's impacted his family, and it's no secret there. But what would you want to ask Jim if you had a chance to sit down with someone like that?
Do you think that if we were further along in the cannabis space, that maybe you wouldn't have lost your brother? Is it something that how do you live with that every day, knowing that, those guys went hard in the paint, with their drug use? And how could cannabis have helped? It's obvious that we all come from a space, and we all, at least these first founding people that are in cannabis, come from a position of experience and concern and compassion. I just love to know, how does that sit with you every day? And then how do you deal with people attacking you? Because we're in the cannabis space, all of a sudden they lump you into drugs, right? And they say, well, you lost your brother to drugs. And it's like, well, yeah, but it was a lifestyle choice for those guys. It's got to be an interesting thing that comes up sometimes for him. I know for me every day, I think about my dad and I think, man, if I could have just got him off opiates and got him into cannabis and got him, been a little bit more willing and that was a different situation than his, but it's got the same track, it's still something that, you live with every day, knowing that something took, a person that was really special away from you. And we're really pushing this plant to help kind of hopefully mitigate that stuff.
And Danny, I'll definitely look to ask him something along those lines, probably off air first, just to make sure I can. But
so
yeah,
I just want to say one more thing. I know the Denver Nuggets are doing really good. I came from the Warriors. I just want to share with you, what it feels like to have a couple rings from the NBA. Just in case you were wondering, I know the Denver Nuggets think they're going, but nah, buddy, Warriors are going to take another one.
Yeah, there's a lot of positive talk out here, so I'm trying to become a fan. I've been out here 2 years trying to get invested. The Broncos have been bad. The Rockies were good last year, so just get me to baseball season. I think we're going to compete.
They're on fire right now, so we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, we will. Okay, everybody. His name is Danny Keith, again, the founder and CEO of Cannabis Club TV. Danny, we'll get you back on, and we'll do it again soon. Okay, man?
Thanks, Tim. Hey, and I just want to say, everybody that watches this show, amazing, amazing work that you're doing, and just keep doing it. And congratulations to the High Times deal and everything else that you have going on.
That's going to do it for us on the program this afternoon. Quick reminder to stay tuned for those two big interviews with Tommy Chong and Jim Belushi. Also, check out Rooted TV, again, airing on Cannabis Club TV, Harvest TV, and Head Shop TV when that comes up and gets live in head shops. Also on High Times TV as well. But for this show, it's over. My name's been Tim Stromble. I'll remind you one more time to work hard, be humble, and stay rooted. See you next week, everybody.